Happy Monday and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed film, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And Jim, we've got another very special guest with us today, a returning guest, our first returning guest, if I remember correctly.
It's been about 7 minutes, I think, yeah.
It has been. It feels a lot longer, Brian. It really does.
My name is Brian Fies. I'm a writer and cartoonist. I've done comics such as Mom's Cancer, The Last Mechanical Monster, and relevant to today's minute, Whatever Happened to the World of Tomorrow.
Well, the World of Tomorrow being the 1939 World's Fair, which plays a rather prominent role in these next 2 minutes. So we're going to be talking about that in just a little bit. But first, as we're inside the hangar out there in Long Beach of a rather famous aviator, and we're looking at 3 examples of his present and future works here. It's 1938, but there's a couple of things that are still in the works hanging off the ceiling. Hal, maybe you'd like to talk about Mr. Howard Hughes and what these machines mean.
Sure, absolutely. Right when this minute starts, in the lower left, you see some technicians down there working on the H-1 Racer, and that was a purpose-built speed machine. That one first flew right about 1935, so it'd be a few years old here, so not at all unreasonable. No anachronisms there. And that was one of those remarkable airplanes. This golden age. We've talked about this with the GB. We've talked about this with some of those other airplanes. That you had, private citizens, and of course, wealthy industrialists like Howard Hughes, building airplanes that were faster and better and sleeker and hotter than anything that the military had. So at something like 352 miles an hour, the H-1 definitely was in that category. Definitely outpaced what the U.S. Army would have been flying at about the time it first came around. And we look over to the right a little bit. We see this really, really well done mock-up. In fact, it's only been recently that I've convinced myself that it is a mock-up of the Pitcairn PCA-2 autogyro. And I know it's a mock-up because there are 2 that survive. There's one at the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village near Detroit, and it's been in that museum for decades. And the other one is right here in Oshkosh, at our museum at EAA. And that one was definitely not, given movie paint and used for the film. So it's a very well done, very nicely done mock-up, which, of course, we'll see the autogyro later in the film. And then, of course, finally, hanging up there, we see a silhouette of what was originally the HK-1 and redesignated the H-4, better known as the Spruce Goose. Now, this one is a little bit anachronistic because Hughes really wouldn't have been working on this design here in 38. This didn't really start until 1942, and Henry Kaiser Aluminum, Liberty Ship fame, he was the one who came and said, you know what, let's build a cargo ship of the sky. But he didn't have the aviation background, so he started with Howard Hughes about 4 years in the future. So maybe he was tinkering with designs for a large transport, but seems a little unlikely.
It's what it's the plane that I think most people associate with Howard Hughes, even though it's a time machine would be involved in this situation. Right. It had to work somehow.
Oh, absolutely.
And it does play a later role, about an hour.
Yeah, it does. And when you consider, if this is the worst thing that I can find in this film in terms of sort of, attention to detail and things like that, believe me, never sit down and watch Pearl Harbor or something like that with me. You'll hate yourself, and then me, and then yourself some more.
And then Ben Affleck.
Yes, exactly. And that other guy with the hair and the squint, I forget. Anyway.
Well, speaking of Howard Hughes, we get our first reveal here with the back of his head, and it's none other than Terry O'Quinn of Lost fame, or maybe Commander Riker's old boss from the Pegasus on a particularly wonderful episode of The Next Generation. And Terry's in good form here as Howard Hughes. I mean, he's coming across as a very serious-minded guy who just lost something very important to him.
I was excited to see Terry O'Quinn in this role because I didn't remember that was him until I was reviewing it for the purposes of this podcast. And he comes on and, oh, it's him. And actually, I did a quick review of different actors who played Howard Hughes over the years, and we got Warren Beatty, Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, Tim Matheson played him, Tommy Lee Jones has played him, Dean Stockwell's played him, and I think in these few scenes of the Rocketeer, the Terry O'Quinn's as good as any of them.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you'd count Jimmy Dean in that with the Diamonds Are Forever issue.
Willard
White.
Oh yeah, that's right.
With the voice changer and everything else.
Yeah, Bert Saxby. Tell him he's fired. That's for another movie minute somewhere else.
And that whole opening scene where, who's in the casket? It's my brother. I got a Bretta. Then Connery just comes back, small world. Oh, man.
Also appearing in this scene is one of my favorite actors, and actually our link to one of my previous podcasts, the Airport Minute. On the left there is the character actor William Boyett, who is probably most famous for being he played the head of the Transglobal Airways mechanics guy that couldn't do the job that Joe Petroni did. So that's William Boyett, but he's probably best known for his role in The Hidden, which was a great 80s film where he's possessed by an alien, and he likes fast cars. So his big line from the show was, "I like that car, I need the keys." If you get a chance, watch The Hidden, great cult film. So Howard is looking pretty disappointed here as he finds out about what Walensky had mentioned, what happened to his Cirrus X3, meaning that it was destroyed out on the runway. The colonel here, William Boyett, says, "Well, it's better lost than in the wrong hands." But he doesn't realize the shape of this project right now, and the shape of this project is it's over and done.
A quick little detail at minutes, or it should be seconds, because the whole thing is a minute. 12 and 13 or so as Hughes is walking away from the window and put the phone down on the desk. You look back in the far left corner, there's a desk model back there. You're sort of a blink and you'll miss it. And I'm about 95% sure it's meant to be the Lockheed Super Electra, which I believe it was in June of 38 that Hughes did a record-setting round-the-world flight in. So that airplane would be very much on his mind here in April of 38 as he's thinking ahead to that.
Wow.
That's a nice pickup. Nice.
It's the beauty of movies by minutes. You get to see every little frame of the thing.
Movies by minutes with nerds.
Yes.
Well, with experts. Experts.
Yes. Wow.
I've always liked you, Brian. I've always liked you.
Well, speaking of minutia, we're looking as Howard is getting increasingly disappointed at the failure of getting the Cirrus X3 back, which we finally get at least a blueprint version for the first time of seeing what this X3 thing is, and it does look like some kind of a double nacelle something or other. I guess shape not too different from that vacuum cleaner that we saw Wilmer toss in the authorized personnel only box. So this is a hint of what
the one that we discussed in the vacuum cleaner minute. Right. The legendary episode.
Yes, and we do get a hint of more of what it is, except only if you have Blu-ray and only if you have really, really good eyes. To the left of the blueprints that we're looking at in around second 30, there's a letter from the Hughes Aircraft, or it says from the Hughes Aircraft Corporation, explaining what the Cirrus X3 is about. And thanks to paying way too much attention to this thing, let me just read a little bit of this. It's to Mr. Siegel, who is supposed to be the chairman of the New York World's Fair, which I think they got that wrong because that would be Grover Whalen was the original. He was the chief designer, and he also stood as one of the chairmen. Robert Moses was another one.
Just fictionalized.
Yeah, it sounds close enough. Nobody can sue, so that's that. But it says, "Dear Mr. Siegel, Hughes Industries proudly announces the development of the Cirrus X3 rocket, engineered by the finest technicians at Hughes Aircraft Company. The Cirrus X3 will allow you to rocket into the future. On display at the 1939 World's Fair, the Cirrus X3 will be viewed upon as clearly the most important technological transportation breakthrough in the history of mankind." And it goes on and on from there, saying that people can use this to travel anywhere they choose. They'll get away from crowded waterways and highways and just be able to go anywhere they want to or were meant to go. So it's it's amazing the amount of detail that Joe Johnson, the director here, had, or the art department under Joe Johnson had decided to put in the movie, with, I guess, in the hopes that someday somebody would be freeze framing on those particular frames.
Exactly.
In a technology that didn't exist yet.
Right. It's amazing that, too, it strikes me, because it wasn't until you zoomed in and transcribed this thing for us, Jim, that I really got to sense for that substance of that letter. And it's so remarkable to me that it's just truly about just individual transportation. Just you want to get somewhere, put this thing on. There's no sense of, well, we're going to start it. And Hughes already has the line about turning anything into a weapon, but it's just it's incredible that's how they were laying this out. Is that they just want us all to be able to rocket everywhere.
Yeah. So
and darn it, why can't
the
I?
answer to that question, "Where's my flying car?" is Howard Hughes had it, but then he burned it in a fireplace. So it's
exactly. One other quick thing before we move past second 30 here. Another little a little detail in the upper left, sort of above the letter. You see there's the sort of the black leather HH, probably a logbook or some other folio of Hughes's, and then underneath that is would be it's a period appropriate flight computer. It's a circular slide rule, sometimes made out of aluminum, sometimes out of a heavy cardstock, and used by pilots to do time and distance calculations and figure wind correction angles and all that kind of stuff. The thing that's remarkable, there's two things. Number one, that sort of grew into what we call the E6B, which is the one that pilots used for decades and decades, and it's the one you see Spock using a few times on the original Star Trek series. But what people might be surprised to learn is that we still use that to this very day for flight training. As soon as you pass the written test, you install an app on your phone and you never look back. But just a few months ago, I was teaching a room full of millennials how to use a slide rule that was virtually identical to the one here on screen. It's got another component to it where the wheel can slide up and down.
Well, it doesn't need batteries. That is a good thing about it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll never fail, unless
it evidently works in outer space too.
Exactly.
And can be used by aliens. So go figure.
For all those crosswinds.
Yeah. Right. Well, the solar wind, it could be coming from some other direction. Wow.
So we get to an interesting point, actually, Hal, what you were saying earlier, that this was a different time when the military really wasn't in front of everything. And the colonel here says that as you were saying before, that people in Washington want to turn everything that flies into a weapon. And the colonel says, "I must insist." And Howard Hughes lays it out for him that he says, "I don't work for the government. I cooperate at my discretion." So he's
there's some neat storytelling here that kind of impressed me in this minute, and there's a lot packed into this little exchange between those men. First of all, we're told that this Cirrus X-3 is deadly dangerous, and the bravest, most skilled pilots Hughes have died trying it out. So that's going to tell us something about the risks of using this thing later in the movie. It tells us that Hughes is kind of a go-your-own-way maverick, and he's going to probably, we are set up to respect a kind of a lone wolf taking this thing and going off and doing his own thing. When the Rocketeer gets his rockets, he's not working for the government. He's not working for the Army Air Corps. He's off doing his own thing, and that's kind of an extrapolation of what Hughes intended in the first place. So, they set up a lot of things here that I think pay off later in the movie.
Yeah, it is great narrative strategies. Really putting the shotguns on the wall right now. So we're getting to the point now where Hughes has had enough. He's picked up his folio and turns around and seems to be ready to do something. And we do notice there is a fireplace directly behind him. But in this particular minute, we don't see what he's going to be doing with that folio, but it can't be very good. And there's an air of finality. One thing that I wonder about is I realize this is a secret project that he was working on, but I can't imagine that the entirety of the XC project fits in a single folder about that thick. When I used to work for an aircraft company, we had airworthiness directives that were many times the size of that for all filings and things. So I can't imagine. I can't imagine the paperwork. Well, I guess it was the 30s, so there wasn't that much paperwork involved, but all the drafting papers and other things, I would think.
It's all in Hughes's head, Jim. It's all in his head.
So I guess he's not getting rid of his mind palace, but he is planning on getting rid of that that folio. Really a great minute. This is a great setup. I realize that they're doing exposition without doing a lot of exposition. We're still not quite clear on. We know it's some kind of a rocket. We know that it has something to do with it's dangerous, as you said, And it's something that the Army wants desperately. It seems like it will change the balance of power with whoever holds it or operates it. So that is a good first act exposition here. And we're going to get some more complications in the next minute. But anyway, well, thanks so much for being with us here, Brian, on this first minute. And if you can come back tomorrow, we'll chat some more about where this is going and the state of the 30s. Why all this stuff was so concentrated on the future, where what people were thinking about as the 30s were coming to an end.
I will set my alarm and be here tomorrow.
So for folks listening in, if you'd like to join in the conversation, we're available at all the usual places. Available at Rocketeer Minute on Twitter. There's a Rocketeer Minute Bulldog Cafe on Facebook. And, of course, the great big site, rocketeerminute.com, where you can get yourself a copy of The Rocketeer if you haven't seen the movie yet. And you can also leave comments about this particular episode or catch up on any of the previous ones. But we'll pick this up here tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Rocketeer Minute. So we'll catch you then. Until next time, over and out.
Go get him, kid.